So Kai, you grew up on the island.
No, no, I'm actually from Alberta.
Yeah.
And when my dad retired, actually he always had dream of the West Coast and had tried a few islands until he finally found this piece. And that was early 90s, I believe, and got this piece of land and started building. And little by little, my home was no longer Calgary. So when I would come back from Europe, I would still would say, oh, I'm going home and go to Calgary. And there wasn't anything left there anymore up till there was no house anymore and no family. And now home is Denman Island. But no, I wasn't brought up here.
So you bring the concerts to Denman Island. Do you have a special love for the island?
Well, as long as, let's see, since the mid-90s, I guess, when I've been spending summers here, I love being here. And luckily also, my wife loves it here. It's something we dream of in Barcelona as it starts getting warmer. And we're thinking, oh, we can't wait to be in the peace and the beautiful nature. So as we usually do, we try to bring music where we go. And it's often a way to help pay for the flight or pay for for whatever expenditures we would have. And so even before my wife was on the scene, I would play with my mom or I'd invite a few friends. So we've been doing concerts for ages, but just not the series. Yeah. And little by little, with the Camerata series that started in Barcelona, I started to think, why not bring this to Denman Island? With the risk that all of a sudden such a beautiful place would become a workplace. Yeah. And I was aware that, okay, we'd love to come here, and maybe one concert's okay, but now if it's a festival, that means organizing, that means renting halls, that means dealing with piano technicians and all that. And I was a little worried that it might take away from our vacation, our paradise vacation. Right. And so far, I must say the reaction is so nice and so warm that it actually motivates me a good part of the year. And a lot of the work we do with the Camerata series in Barcelona is really geared to bringing it and making it better here. So, and I also notice how easy it is to organize here in comparison to when I do it elsewhere.
It must be a different audience.
It's a different audience. It's also the people of the island a lot know my family and know us now. It's maybe a more retired audience that they're not working during the days, like maybe in Barcelona is the case, or in other big cities. I mean, this West Coast is a different type of people. It's extremely warm audience. I mean, we have them warm in other places, but this is really special.
I would think you're really seen as a sort of star islander coming back, and we get to sample your talents for that festival. And I think most people regard it as a real treat, but it's also, you're not just another gifted performer. You know, you're sort of one of us.
That's nice to hear. I always say it takes two to tango, and the more rapport you have with the audience, the more they're asking of you, the more they're ready to absorb, the more you give. Yeah. So it's such a nice relationship, actually, that the first years I was wondering, will they accept more than one concert? 2? Should I do 3? And now, of course, I ask the question, do you want more? Yes, of course. I think 3 is enough. Yeah. But it's really such a nice feeling that I won't have to fight to get an audience, or I won't have to wonder why people didn't come. What did we do wrong? Did I speak too much, or was it the wrong composer? And there's just that feeling of, we get to Denman and things will go smoothly.
I have noticed, writing for the Grapevine, that islanders really appreciate good information. So there's a lot of opinion on the island. In fact, the history of Denman in its recent decades is cratered with the youthful excesses of people who are too confident of their opinions. So I have found that on any issue, if you actually give them facts and information, they appreciate it. And that seems to extend to music. I know people think that most people seem to have very subjective ideas about music. They don't really want to take it apart. And some people have said to me, well, Kai's lectures, maybe they're a bit too long and people don't really need to know all that. But the people who say that to me are usually people who listen to a lot of classical music and have some training already. Whereas I notice some reaction to the audience. It's very positive. I think you could go on talking. In fact, I wondered why you wouldn't actually include as part of the festival 1 or 2 lectures on music. More work for you. But I noticed even at the Baroque Festival, they had a lecture on medieval music and some aspect of Baroque music. That was quite theoretical, and there was an audience. Not a big audience, but people turned up.
It's good to hear. It's very informative, to hear it presented this way. My intention is really just to have people love the music I love. Mm-hmm. And it's not necessarily to educate. It's just to share my passion. And I don't prepare the speeches. I don't really know what I'm going to say. I just know that I feel the need that by giving them a little bit of information that maybe seem like a lot sometimes, they'll appreciate more. And that's all I care about. I know this music is incredible. Most people have heard of the name of the composer, but we don't know the chamber music of Brahms. Mm-hmm. We know the Requiem, we know the Symphony, the Piano Concerti or something. Those are the ones that know. Oh, but the chamber music we don't know. And I notice even the pieces that they've heard before, of course they prefer. The ones they know less, they don't like much. Mm-hmm. And it all has to do with that motto. The more you know, the more you love. I know it's great music. Mm-hmm. Of course it can be subjective. But it's a matter of knowing it. But just by giving some help, at least, to catch some themes, at least those people that are leaning one way or the other, they might fall to the I love it side instead of the I don't know it, or nah, that's not my taste. It's interesting what you say about wanting to know facts, and it's true that it's not about, again, educating them of these facts. It's just thinking that some of this information will help. And the length, I was just thinking about that today. I know I get so many positive comments about the explanations, and I don't hear the negative ones necessarily, except that someone said that it was too long. Someone that said, and to that I have two things to say. One, maybe in the future I'll just put a stopwatch on and limit it to a certain amount of time and offer to those who don't want to hear it just to step out. And two, that it is my festival and I want to do what I want to do. Yeah. And if I think it's important, maybe I'm taking the wrong road, but if I think it's important, then I have to learn for myself.
Maybe it's because I've always had a taste for 20th century music, that is not a matter of taste. 20th century music seems to be about some kind of social reality expressed phonically, a phonic landscape of the terrible events and suffering of the 20th century. So I've never thought of music as a question of taste. Anyone who says it's just not my taste, I think, well, you don't know enough.
You haven't tasted it.
Yeah. I mean, maybe you should understand it more. Mm-hmm. Most things that are accessible, that are really great, are somewhat difficult. Mm-hmm. They're not easy.
The more you know, the more you love. I agree. And it's hard to argue. I mean, I would love to go into the 20th century. I know so many people talk about the Hornby Island Festival of the past. And it was some person, I don't know his name, and I think we're talking about the 70s and 80s, that would do all Beethoven year, and he arrived apparently to all Bartók and all, I don't know, but something that was well into the 20th century. And it was quite a while ago, and I still hear people talking about it. And it certainly wasn't molded on that, but I thought, okay, that means there is a receptivity at least. No, people will be ready to receive this at some point. And maybe we're not just ready yet. And my thinking, though, is that by explaining, by showing what those sounds mean, in the 20th century, how it could be interpreted, it'll help to understand.
Yeah.
And it's, as you say, the people that are closed will remain closed. But maybe there's a certain percentage who will, let's say, well, yeah, that's true, and that's not necessarily ugly. That's not just because it's 20th century. It has so much to tell us.
Well, it's astonishing where the audience can be. Where I work downtown, I listen to music when I'm working down there. And there's someone who comes in, a woman. She's said to be homeless. I don't know if she really is, but she's said to be homeless. And she comes in and is on the phone to use some of the services that are available in the foyer. And she said to me, "Oh, turn that off." And it was some Puccini, I think. So when she came in later, I said, "Well, so I'm sorry about the music, but who do you like?" She said, "I only listen to the Kronos Quartet." Well, that's the most advanced avant-garde music, and her favorite composer was Kevin Volans.
Wow. Yeah.
Well, she's the only person I've met who would actually say, "I love someone from the 20th century."
I'll tell you what, we were just at the Blue Heron bookstore the other day, because they sell tickets also, and I went to pick it up, and he said, "Oh yes, I'm the new owner," and it was a man with a German accent.
Great.
Yeah.
Someone actually bought a bookstore. That's
exactly.
amazing.
And he said it was always his dream. He's a geologist, and his dream was to have a bookstore and a record store.
Oh.
And he said, so he's going to try to do both.
Oh, great.
In Comox. And so I saw that he was somewhat interested, and he said, yes, many people came in to buy the tickets. I said, "Oh, that's nice." I said, "Do you like classical music?" Because I wanted to invite him. He said, "Yes," and he didn't really say much more. And after, he said, "Actually, what I'd like to do is have a very specialized part of this bookstore for vinyl records." And I said, "Oh yeah, that's very nice. What kind of music?" He says, "Not the the normal pop and things, but things like Stockhausen." I said, "What?" He said, "I don't think it'll be very commercial," to take the word again. But he says it doesn't matter. Then people will know that there's a certain niche in Comox where you can listen to things. I think Stockhausen was a little bit too impressed, but it would be certainly impressive, no, to go to a bookstore and hear Stockhausen.
Here, yes. I've been told that you are concerned about the decline in the interest in classical music. Is this really an issue for you?
It's something that we all live every day when we look into the audiences and see only elderly people, or the audience dwindling, and this happens in the opera, in the symphony. We also hear about some of the operas closing down, or some of the symphony orchestras going broke, some of the chamber music series that don't attract enough to keep afloat. I am concerned. I also think, though, I have a really good run with what I do in Barcelona, with the series that I run there, with the concerts we play all over with Catherine, and an experience here that really gives you hope.
Yeah.
Because, not that they're older or younger, it's just that they're full and they're coming with a lot of enthusiasm. And the same thing in Comox. We changed venue this year, and it was full. And we didn't even know how, because no publicity got out. It was just word of mouth, and I think then maybe we should be worried about future of classical music. We do wonder with Catherine often as teachers, there's so many students that come in, often that don't have a very high level, who still want to be musicians, and we think, boy, if you're not up there really at the high level, how will you survive? And then we realize that they all do find a path. They find their way, and they find a way with therapy, or with some kind of music-related thing, or teaching, or in their village. It doesn't seem to be dead yet. And one of the big hopes is when we go to China, that we see the audiences filled with young people. I mean, from 5 up, age 5, not just 20 years old, but from all the mothers bring their kids, and then there's teenagers and there's youth that are interested. We even see people holding hands on a date, going to a concert, something we haven't heard of, in 40 years. So it is encouraging.
That is astonishing what's going on in China.
Yeah.
The sheer number of pianos sold,
Yeah,
and all the prodigies that come out of 1 billion people. You're going
absolutely.
you're going to have at least 100, 200,000 of them.
Yeah. And on that note, I remember the success that the Ottawa Chamber Music Festival had, or has, that they would put on a festival for, I can't remember how long, maybe say a week, and they would have 6 or 7 concerts a day. One at 10, one at 12, one at 2, one at 4, one at 8, one at 11. And you would have people standing in line in front of all the venues asking, and how many did you go to? And how many did you go to? I've been already to 14. Oh, I've been to 12. They would buy a pass and they would just go to classical music concerts. And I thought, well, then it's not dying.
What's going on in Ottawa? Yeah. So I think one of the things that's successful about your festival is it is got a degree of intimacy about it. Partly your presentation, but partly the splendor of the playing and the repertoire, which is, you can hear all the different instruments. I think it's perfect for a venue like this, and I think it's also something everyone can enjoy. You can, it's easier to appreciate the quality of music when you can actually hear the cello and hear the violin. It's not this great big sound coming at you. And I think Robert's experienced quite a lot of success with his house concerts.
Mm-hmm.
You can sit there and they've got the elbow of the cellist says you have to move over.
Right.
So on that level, I think that's something where classical music has a tremendous appeal. I mean, yes, you can hear the bigger pieces and that kind of thing, opera and symphonies, but to actually be able to be near the music and to hear the instruments live, I think that's an experience you can't get from any other channel. CD, streaming, you're just not going to get that and see people working. And I think it's so small venues like that seem to me, I think, very attractive.
I agree completely. In fact, Kathy Reeder just told me yesterday she'd just heard Beethoven's Ninth Symphony with a 140-person chorus. She said she didn't. She said it was glorious, but she said there was much more sound coming from the instruments, the 4 instruments in the Denman Island Community Hall. The fill and I think intimacy. I think you're absolutely right. Is really important and makes it and actually brings it back to what it was. It was chamber music. It was music for a chamber, and it was composed for these salons and composed to be played in small places and maybe the theater of the castle or after dinner, and I think this being so close to the musicians, being with them to share the music and to share the moments and the energy they're putting in and everything that's happening, the dynamics between we're maybe winking or there's a smile or the page doesn't turn or whatever it is, or the chair is creaking, or you can actually see the mute that I'm putting on, or you hear I think it's true, it's very special. As to the programming, I find it amazing that I decided to do what I want to do and not to bend in the way that most festivals are. And most festivals are about attracting as many people as possible and having as many different types of music as possible. So some go more eclectic, so there's some fiddling and some Celtic and blah, blah, blah. And some within the classical realm say, okay, but we also need a flute, we also need the voice, we also need this. So this way there's different combinations of different pieces, which I think is great, and I think it attracts a lot of people. But my idea was, on the contrary, I don't want to, in my words, lower myself to that level of pleasing everyone. I want them to like what I like. And the idea of bringing one composer is that by the end, people will know more, not only about his life, but his language, his musical language, and will, next time they hear Brahms or Schubert or Mozart or Ravel, they'll recognize that language and they'll appreciate it more.
Yeah.
And I'm just so happy, and relieved that this formula is working.
Yeah.
It means that I can do what I want. And in a way, it's also selfish because both Catherine and I, we immerse ourselves in this composer during the year. We
Really?
read the books, we listen to other works, and even in the choice of repertoire, it makes me listen to the other quartets that I didn't really know, both sextets, or the other quintet, which I'd never heard. I knew this one, of course. I end up bringing some of the most famous pieces because I also want them, to please. I don't bring the most obscure pieces of the composer. But by reading the biographies, they talk about pieces that I didn't even know about. And so I just go on internet and I listen to the piece. And so we really immerse ourselves in the life of the composer and his pieces, and we end up much richer. And what's so enriching to us is to play many pieces of the same composer and to apply things we learned from one to the other.
Yeah.
And to wonder, what did he mean with this sign of a crescendo diminuendo here? Why does it not seem logical? And you see it in another writing, and it immediately gives you a hint of what he meant in the other one. It's really a great way to grow.
So you gradually decipher his language.
Exactly.
Now, people talk about reading books that have changed their lives. Well, you mentioned reading books about composers. What music has changed your life personally?
What music has changed my life personally?
Yeah, you're a professional musician. When people say, "Oh, but when I was this age, I read this book," and suddenly have you ever had an experience like that?
Ooh, I remember in depressing moments as a young person listening to Mahler's symphonies and thinking I could just cry my heart out. I remember deciding that I wanted to know all 9 Beethoven symphonies, and we still did drop needles at the time, and I could just drop the needle and recognize, and that was such a personal experience. I remember moments in the train in France feeling lonely and listening to Beethoven's Archduke Trio, and everything seemed clear. I remember Goldberg variations with Gould in moments with a little glass of wine in my apartment in Paris, and thinking, this is what it's all about. I don't know, there's so many great pieces that influenced the way. I don't know if anything actually changed my life, but it certainly participated in the changes.
Yeah, lots of people talking about books, they talk about cognitive changes, or intellectual changes in their life. I remember when I first heard the Firebird Suite, I was 15, I thought, that's really awful. And then I went to see the film with Margot Fontaine, and instantly it changed. And the experience of experiencing such a change of mind about it was in itself revelatory.
I maybe learned that my family was not opera fans. We weren't the Saturday listeners to the Met. It was more symphonic chamber music, solo instrument. And I did realize in my mid-20s that this was a hole in my education, and I had a Czech girlfriend at the time, and I decided at least I'll start with the Janacek operas and learn the language. So at least I read the text, I read the translation, and I learn how to pronounce it. And that was also quite a revelation, because I thought that this was really incredible, really intense. And thanks to that, I started to listen to Wagner. I'd never listened to Wagner. I didn't think I would be a fan at all, and became a huge fan of Strauss operas, and of course Mozart and so on. And what happens a few years later, I become concertmaster of an opera orchestra.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Now, what about Canadian music? Have you ever been influenced by any music written by Canadians?
Influenced in a good way?
Well, what's your opinion about the state of music in Canada?
I unfortunately have been gone so long that I feel it's important to participate in the music scene of contemporary music of where I am. So when I was in Paris, I played a lot of contemporary music and knew a lot of it. And it's one of the ways we kept our musical lives interesting. You know, you do
course.
some things that you have to earn money, and some things that you don't. But the contemporary music is always a challenge. Some of it I hated. Some of it is fascinating, and it was a little bit the Boulez school, but the young ones.
His sonatas piano sonatas are incredible.
There's things that are incredible Boulez. Some things are so hard to understand and so hard to play. And then going to Barcelona, to Spain, I participated somewhat in the contemporary ensembles there, but then became too busy with the opera. And so that whole professional life, I don't have much contact with the Canadian scene. I did as a kid when we had an obligatory, a compulsory Canadian piece to play, and it was always suffering because, do we have to learn this? And it doesn't sound good, and we just had to learn it because it was compulsory, and we got through it. And that was my experience. I don't, unfortunately, have much experience since. And I know many of these festivals do participate in a commission or finding a composer they like and presenting Canadian music. My formula now with one composer, it's a little bit complicated to do that, but we'll find a way to do it eventually.
I think one reason your festival remains fresh and successful is because it is small. When you're talking about the other festivals, if they get too big, then the whole thing comes, how do we keep it going? How do we feed the beast?
You're absolutely right.
You don't have that problem.
You're absolutely right. And I know that's happening in Pender Harbor this year, is they've done, I think, 10 years or 15. And it's just got bigger and bigger, and the receptions and the needs and the volunteers, and it just becomes a huge thing to manage.
Nightmare.
And it eventually folds.
Yeah, they die.
Yeah. And this is my strategy. You know, people say, what about your board and the committee and the volunteers? And so I just do it myself. I try not to get too stressed because there's the week before, the posters are, the tickets aren't out, and even the tickets I receive, I try to respond to everyone. So it's true. I have to. I want to bring it on the road, and because our desire as musicians is just to make it better. And we know that if we can repeat that another time somewhere, it'll be better. And if we know we can have another experience, it'll be better. It also makes it logistically much better for the musicians we bring from afar if there's 3 concerts instead of 1, and financially and musically. But I know that I don't want to go too far. I don't want it to get out of hand where we have to fold.
Yeah. It is astonishing to me. Robert talking about the Baroque Festival, it's astonishing the people they find. There seems to be on these islands a lot of people who play all kinds of instruments. There's a lot of music on the islands. A lot.
There's a lot of people who were musicians who it's true. We were just in Quadra and a woman came up and said, I played 25 years in the Vancouver Symphony. No, it's true. A lot of professionals and ex-professionals and wannabe professionals.
When you talk about people finding their own path, I for a while I was writing up the bluegrass singers that come through. I know nothing about bluegrass, but it's a paper. You go and cover it, and one was she had a lovely voice, and it turned out that she was an opera student at Mount Allison, but her real hero was Janis Joplin. And in her second year, her teacher said, "You'll never sing like Janis Joplin." So now she's out singing her own songs,
and she loves it.
And she has all the voice technique.
Fantastic.
So interesting.
She found her path. Yeah. No, it is reassuring, because some people really are met by comments like this that take the wind out of you.
Yeah.
Sometimes they take the wind out, or sometimes they put you in the right direction, actually.
Yeah.
Hopefully the latter more often.
There's a direction in 21st century music towards a neo-romantic movement. Do you play any of that music? People like?
No. Well, actually, that's not true. We did neo-romantic, I wouldn't say, but at least easier to understand than some of the, let's say, mid-20th century. There was this Scottish composer, Macmillan, that we played.
Yeah.
And it was the kind of thing that I was asked to play it And I thought it was so simple.
Yeah.
It was so simple. And I thought, oh, come on. And it was just an effect. But only upon performing it that I saw the effect it had on the people. And it made me reconsider my own bias, actually, because I was used to complicated or music.
Yeah.
And it was really amazing. And I guess one has to find, between just the effect and the one that just has actually a profound meaning.
Yeah. People like Arvo Part and whatnot.
Is sometimes, exactly, oh, come on.
Yeah,
That's an effect. And sometimes there's wow moments.
Yeah, the complexity of the repertoire you play of Brahms, the complexity of the emotions, seems to be something that in the 21st century, people are craving something simpler. So you don't hear those gigantic, monstrous 20th century pieces by people like Penderecki.
Right.
Now you hear people like, I'm trying to think of some names come to mind.
Well, of course, John Adams and
John
company,
Adams, that kind of stuff. Yeah, John Adams and Part. They seem to want something that is more regular, less challenging, less disturbed, less technically demanding. It's an interesting direction that music's going.
We, the purists, are afraid that it becomes commercially minded, just to sell. And there will be the composers that will go that direction.
Yeah.
And there will, in fact, the contemporary music scene in Paris was very much divided that way. The Boulez school, which was not commercially oriented in the least, it was, if anything, good French intellectual, Cartesian, super complicated.
Yeah.
And then there was, and I always forget his name, Lacan, I think, this other school that was a little bit like the John Adams, whatever it was, catchy rhythms and repetitive and so on. And I was invited to both groups, although I was more part of the Boulez school. But when I did play with the other ones, I thought, this is so much fun and it's so easy in comparison. And it's I don't have to count and be worried, mad, and I don't have to suffer so much playing it. So I could easily understand both sides. And so it's true. It's true.
Well, that's good. Well, it's been delightful talking to you.
Thank you. A pleasure.
Yeah,
thanks for
it's
doing this.
very good. And your playing is just splendid. I think everyone looks at that, and your wife's playing is just amazing, Janine. Yeah,
Catherine.
Catherine. It's just the quality of the playing is something that I think blows everyone away.
Oh, wow. We try to do
the
our best.
Power of it.